The next section of the final exam review is on protein. We're going to start with protein structure. What I want you to look at is our basic building block of proteins. We like to say the building block of life because the amino acids, when they're strung together and then coiled and turned and folded, they make up proteins, which really are what give us life and make up almost every part of our body. So we'll discuss the importance of protein in this section. Now we're going to start with just the primary structure. Remember, that is with the amino acid, as you can see up there. And then as you can see in A1, A2, A3, these are all a representation of amino acids linked together. So this creates, when they're linked together, this does create the amino acid chain, which is the primary structure of a protein. The primary structure of a protein is not functional. Just because they have all the amino acids and just because they're linked together doesn't mean it can actually do anything. Now, the secondary stage, or the secondary structure of a protein is either a chain and a coil, as you can see on the left there, or folded into a sheath, as you can see on the right. So this is the secondary structure. The tertiary structure is actually when it coils and folds on itself. And lastly is when what we call the quaternary structure is when these tertiary structures, these kind of folded and then coiled amino acid chains, then join together, and that's going to make the functional unit or the functional protein. The key here, the take-home point, is that a protein's shape is going to determine its function. Now, the only reason I show you this here, when we look at a carbohydrate, it's pretty simplistic. We just have this glucose linked together. The lipids, these are carbons, and they each have hydrogen on there, maybe a double bond or a few double bonds. And look at protein. Look how complex protein is compared with lipids and carbohydrates. Now, there are a number of functions of protein that I want you to know. And before I go on to that, I do want to mention one other point, that one of the main key differences, in addition to the complexity of a protein compared to carbohydrates and lipids, is that it has nitrogen, or it contains nitrogen, and we'll get back to that in a minute. So proteins can act as an acid-base balance. They also form antibodies. They help and assist in blood clotting, and then very importantly, work as enzymes. Their hormones, an example can be insulin. I want to mention that lipids can also be hormones. They assist in transport, for example, hemoglobin, which transports oxygen in the blood. There are structures. You look down at your skin, you're looking at a protein. Your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles, everything you have in your body is going to be made up of protein. Now, energy. Protein can be used as energy, but only if necessary. The digestion of protein really starts in the stomach, and we talked about this. As it goes through the esophagus into the stomach, that low pH uncoils the protein. Remember, we have that really complex shape. So we have the tertiary structures are linked together. That's the quaternary structure. Those are basically pulled apart, and then that protein was folded. So once it gets into the stomach, it unfolds, it unwinds. And then it's just going to be that long strand of amino acids. So once it gets in the stomach here, we can look at this complex shape, which then just becomes this strand of amino acids. So again, we start with our main protein, which goes to our strand, which we call a polypeptide chain, which is then broken down into either a tripeptide on the left, dipeptide, or single amino acids. And that's really when those single amino acids can be absorbed. Remember, that happens in the intestines, absorbed into the bloodstream. And here we can see these single amino acids. They get absorbed across the intestinal lining into the bloodstream, and now can be utilized. So our carbohydrate gives us 4 calories per gram. We know that when this is the glucose, it can be broken down into these basically two carbon chains, and then you get your 4 calories per gram. Fat also, again, we have this longer structure here, broken down into these 2 carbon fragments and given 9 calories per gram. Protein, remember, we have the amino acids. They're linked together. We have the nitrogen component as well as these side chains. So this is much more complex. But what happens is, again, it can break it down into these carbon fragments, these 2 carbon fragments, but also there's nitrogen. Again, we get 4 calories per gram, but it takes quite a bit of energy to get there, but we waste that nitrogen. So why is that wasted? Well, it's wasted because it's part of this amino acid, and the amino acid is our building block for protein, our building block for life. So we've just wasted our ability to utilize that for a very important function when we utilize it for energy. The recommendations for most Americans are 0.8 grams per kilogram. That's going to be more for someone who is pregnant or for a bodybuilder. Athletes generally need up into the range of over 1.2 grams per kilogram. But keep in mind that most Americans are not extreme athletes and only go through pregnancy for a short period. The 0.8 grams per kilogram is a minimum. That's going to be your 10% here. Most Americans need 10 to 15% of their calories from protein. 35% is this, kind of for the extreme, and so this is going to be your upper limit. So most Americans need 10 to 15% of their diet from protein. I want you to keep that in mind. Now I'm going to finish here with our controversy. Remember, we talked about the omnivore diet versus the vegetarian diet. And even though I have it, meat versus vegetable here, it really doesn't have to be meat-only diet or vegetable-only diet. Those certainly are the extremes. There are a lot of nutrients that are very important in meat. I would like to say that for some people, they can get those nutrients from a plant-based diet. So if you are a vegetarian, you can eat an entirely plant-based diet and get all the nutrients. You have to be smarter about what you're eating, and you definitely can't waste any time eating any processed food. On the other side, the meat, there's a lot of bad things that come along with meat. Meat is not a whole food as shown here. I like this image because we're looking at whole food meat, not processed deli products or processed jerkies or other types of processed meat that have had nitrates, which are linked with stomach and colon cancer. So a lot of the problems with meat is what's added to them, how they're processed, and how they're cooked, potentially say on a barbecue, with all the carcinogens that go along with that. Certainly you can do that with vegetables as well. Plant-based diets tend to have a lower risk of most chronic diseases, including cancer and heart disease and diabetes, compared to a meat-based diet. It doesn't mean you can't include some meat into a diet that has an abundance of vegetables or plant food. The key is whole foods. No matter what you're going for, no matter what you're eating, you really want to eat a whole food. And I do want to point to, because the China study and the reach that was done by T. Cole and Campbell, and what showed was that the consumption of animal protein was associated with an increased risk of cancer, despite the way that it was prepared. So you always want to keep that in mind and keep that in the back of your head. All right, this will be the end of the section on protein.